Hello and welcome back to Faraday Academy. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the Vuetify UI component library for Vue.js, which is the most popular component library for Vue applications. Several people have requested that I do Vuetify videos and make a tutorial using the new Vuetify grid system as well as some other components. If you are new here, my name is Gwen. And I make different coding tutorials, I do coding live streams, and talk about different programming topics. So if you are interested in this kind of stuff, then please subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to like this video if you want to see more of this type of content. So let's get into it. This video today is a demo and breakdown of the component library, just like my previous few Vue videos have been. If you want a more comprehensive component by component tutorial, then check out my free course that I just launched on scrimba.com covering the Vuetify framework. Over the past 6 months, I've actually built 2 different Vuetify applications on this channel, the curriculum app I'm currently working on, as well as Regex Breakfast. And then I also built the storefront application, which I used for my Vuetify course that I just launched on scrimba.com. But I decided to quickly create another Vuetify application based off of the productivity theme, just so I could compare it apples to apples with the last video I did on the element framework. So you can see this is very similar. I have a homepage, tasks, calendar, table, and a form, as well as some icons just demonstrating how they look in the Vuetify Navbar and a draw menu. The 10,000-foot overview of Vuetify is that it's a Vue UI component library, which I believe has around 90 components right now. And as far as the stats and downloads show us, it's the most popular one in the world for Vue.js. It seems like they are doing releases, commits, and updates a couple times a week, which is incredible. They've added so many new components and frameworks even since I started using this maybe a year and a half ago. And one great thing about it is that it has full support for accessibility in its components and theming. Now, one thing to note about Vuetify, Vuetify comes with so many design styles and patterns out of the box, and they are all based off of this material design, which, if you don't know, is a creation of Google. It's a standard for creating digital interfaces that's supposed to be based off of ink and paper designs with extra features like elevation, etc. So you can see more about that at material.io/design. The instructions for installing Vuetify in the Getting Started menu are pretty clear. It first recommends that you install it via the Vue CLI package, and then it goes on to detail how you can also use it via CDN or the npm module. If I know that I'm going to be using it in a project, then the very first thing I do when I create my Vue project with the Vue CLI is to add Vuetify, because Vuetify invasively changes files, the original files that it gives you, hello world and your app file. It changes all of that to use Vuetify components. So if you don't use it first and you've already updated some of your files or folders, then it's kind of going to mess everything up for you. So it's best to just go ahead and use Vue add Vuetify to install the Vue CLI package first before you do anything else in your repo. Let's start off talking about this top navbar here. Now the component for this in the Vuetify docs, it's called app bars, and you can see there's a drop down for different types of bars. There's this app bar, there's also a toolbar, and then there are system bars, which aren't the same thing. They aren't really used for navigation. So this is an example. So I'm just going to talk about the toolbars and app bars here. I talk a little bit about this in my course on scrimba.com, but basically both of these components say that they are used as the primary source of navigation for a site, and that they work well with the V navigation draw, which is basically the draw that comes out from the side of the page. If you look at toolbars, it says it's also the primary source of navigation for the site and is great with the V navigation draw. And when you look at examples, you can see it's something that looks like a top navigation where you can have a draw and some icons. You have different kinds of examples here. And then for app bars, if you look at this, it's so similar. Then what is the difference between the two of these, and when would you use one or the other? Well, if you look at the release notes for version 2.0, you can see that on the V toolbar component, which you used to use for all navigation in your website, there's now a new component that extends the toolbar, and all scrolling techniques and main app functionality have been deprecated and moved to V app bar. So you can see in V app bar, there are extra props and options for things like scrolling animations. So now if I scroll down the page, it collapses. But I can also hide on scroll. I can, when I scroll, make it appear, and so on. So the V toolbar is more likely used for widgets, or maybe if you're making a markdown editor inside of your application, something like that. This is a really good example for what you might use a toolbar for, putting it on top of a map and using it as a search bar, and the icons neatly fit inside, and it gives you this out of the box. So that's a really great way to use the toolbar. In this site, I don't have any scrolling animations or anything, so I could really use either component for this because I'll get the same kind of styles. It will resize my icons, give me the icon hover, these type of buttons, etc. Now, if you look in the code at that component, go into my app, and you can see I have this V app bar, but inside all of these nested components are toolbar components. And that's because V app bar extends from toolbar but keeps the same names. So you have V toolbar title, and then your navigation will be inside V toolbar items. Now, I don't think this is really intuitive, because when you look at the docs in app bars, you can scroll up and down. It doesn't give you an example of how to put text links inside of the nav. It seems to be suggesting that you use this kind of tab navigation, or that you just use a draw, because these are the examples that it gives you, as well as some icons and drop downs and those kind of things. And even if you look at the API up here, it just gives you two components, V app bar and V app bar nav icon. And in toolbars, that's where you can see the rest, toolbar title and toolbar items. Now, if you don't use toolbar items here and you try to style this, it's a bit hit or miss. It's almost like you have to figure out what to do for yourself with navigation. So if you try to do like router links or divs, for example, let me uncomment this and see it squishes everything up against each other. You could do your own custom styling, but then you don't get the hover either that it provides by default if you nest them as text buttons inside of vToolbar items. And since there isn't an example in the docs, it's kind of like you have to play around with it and try out different things, like, oh, maybe I use a list, and a list will align my items in the nav bar. But you can look and see what a list does, it just puts them vertically. So I think Vuetify could improve their documentation a bit and add some more examples for how to use a standard navbar and make it a little bit less confusing, so you don't have to dig through the changelog and figure out what the difference between toolbar and navbar is. Other than that, they do have a ton of props and options that you can use for the navigation, and a lot of common things that you might need, like hide on scroll or show on scroll, animations, capturing events, stuff like that. So after my links, I have these two buttons. I don't have them set up for anything, but again, because they're nested inside of the V app bar component, Vuetify sizes all of these buttons and icons to fit perfectly inside of the bar, including the hover states. And I basically just added this button myself. Here's the button, and honestly it was a little bit squished against these two icons, so I added some spacing, some margin in between them. And then when I click on it, it sets draw to true. The draw comes out, it gives me this overlay just as part of the draw component. And then it displays lists nicely inside of here and gives you the option for hover states and links and that kind of thing. This is just something extra I added from the Vuetify docs because I think it looks nice. It's basically aligned with their Flexbox classes. And then when I click outside, it automatically handles closing it for me. This draw is very similar to the one in Element UI, except you can't have multiple draws open, which I don't think you'll need most of the time anyways. I'm sure you could if you played around with it, but it doesn't work out of the box. These are some of the props I have set up for the nav draw, and then you can see I just have a list of links nested inside with the vList component, giving it the navigation prop because it's being used inside of a draw. That gives me a nice hover state for the links. And then inside the list, I have these vList items. And then this V divider adds a horizontal line in between items. You can also pass a prop here to say vertical, and that will put a vertical line in between items. Just a little bit more documentation and a few more examples, a bit of rewording, and I think this top navigation or those two elements, the app bar and the toolbar, are going to be awesome. All right, let's talk about styling. Vuetify has lots of built-in classes to style the page, from handling typography by changing the size and look of text, to spacing, changing margin and padding on elements, setting the background and text colors, and a lot of other things as well. With Vuetify, you're basically getting a whole CSS design class library, plus almost 90 functional components like the nav menu and tables, calendar views, etc. And on top of that, you get lots of extra things like animations and built-in accessibility features. So with all of their classes here, I think some of the most useful ones are the spacing class, where you can easily set the amount of margin and padding on elements in increments of 4, and that kind of standardizes it across your application. I also use their built-in flex classes a lot. Basically, you set elements as this dflex, which means display flex, and then you can use all of your normal flex classes, like justify content, align items, etc. It also gives you all of these standard screen sizes to use in the flex classes out of the box, so you can style for extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large screens. Another interesting thing about Vuetify is that it comes with the V icon component. Basically what you do is when you're setting up Vuetify, you tell it what kind of icons you want to use, whether it's material design or font awesome or whatever, and it will give you a standard size and styling for them out of the box. If you look in the docs, it tells you different ways that you can install the material design icons, or if you want font awesome, then it gives you the links for font awesome. And then depending on where you put the icons, it sizes the icon for you. Because I'm using an icon inside a button, it gives me this nice circular hover state. If I'm using the icon next to text, then Vuetify also gives me a nice spacing from the text, so I don't even have to set up styles for that. Basically, the only thing that I do is use the V icon element and then say left. So this will pull it left, basically give space in between this icon to the left and the text to the right, which is what you can see it's doing in these buttons here, sizing and spacing the icons. You can see that I didn't style these icons at all, but they're different sizes from the other icons in the nav menu, because the Vuetify framework has already styled these for me. As far as using colors in the application, Vuetify comes with these standard colors that you can use: primary, success, warning, error, and info, as well as some grades, black, white, stuff like that. Now, what you will usually do for an application, if you come here to my curriculum app that I've been building, you'll see that I set a theme to overwrite those colors that Vuetify came with. So if I look in my Vuetify.js plugin config file, I set the theme because I'm using the light theme, and I overwrote all of these colors here. So when I use the primary color, it uses my orange instead of the standard material blue color. While they do have these color classes, I really never use these: color red text. maybe if you're building a quick demo or something, but you're probably going to set all of your colors as custom classes or just in your theme. The grid system isn't much to write home about. It's pretty standard. You have 12 columns, and of course you have all of your breakpoints for standard screen sizes. So you basically have a V container, and inside of the container you put your rows, and inside of those rows you have columns. This is built in Flexbox, just like almost every other UI component framework grid system, except for I think the Foundation XY grid. So this works the same way that it would with Bootstrap or with anything else, except the keywords might be spelled a little bit differently or be in a different order. It's well documented. You can also mix these containers, rows, and columns with Flexbox to get the exact layout that you want. So you can use their Flexbox and their grid system interchangeably. And this is built in Flexbox after all. The calls keyword works for all screen sizes. And then for above extra small, you can also use other keywords like small, medium, etc. In this productivity app, you can see that all page content I've gone ahead and wrapped in a container. And then inside each page, I have those wrapped in rows and then a column with offsets. So it will be 6 out of 12 columns wide for any screen small or up. So anything except extra small basically, and then the offset will be 3 columns, so it will center it on the page. And you can see it does center it. You can see inside of this row that the container is giving me margin and padding, and then inside of the row I have 12 columns available. And then when I hover over columns, you can see the yellow, that it's giving me 3 columns worth of margin and that the content takes up 6 columns in the middle. One more layout element you have available to you is vSpacer, which basically pushes things as far apart as possible. So it works like justify content space between, except you just put it in between the elements that you want to push apart. For example, I want all of these elements to go to the right in the navbar, and then I want my logo to be to the left. So let me get rid of this spacebar real quick. And now you can see everything is up against each other. Nothing is pushed to the right anymore. When I add the spacer back, then you can see everything is as normal. I have my links to the right and my logo to the left. Now let's quickly look at the TreeView component. This component is called a TreeView because you can basically open up these lists and see nested elements and keep opening them up as you go down the line. As an option here, I have also added checkboxes, and you can see there's some nice default functionality, which is exactly the same as how it works in the Element UI framework. If I check off one here, this will have a minus, and now I can check them all off here. If there are multiple nested elements, then if I check off these 2, then all of the unique parent elements will also be checked. You can also see in the docs there are a lot of different options that you have for both styling and functionality in TreeView components. One of the coolest things that they've included is the ability to search through these elements nested here, which are just basically nested objects in your state. So if I come here, I can say R, A, and I can see in these 2 branches, it gives me all of the RAs. Now, if I say case sensitive, then it gets rid of the lowercase RA. Examples like these are so nice in the Vuetify docs because you can see the live examples on CodePen, you can see the code on GitHub, and then you can also see the code right here in the browser to just copy paste. Like this TreeView, most of the components you see on Vuetify are very well documented with good examples. I just want to show you the nested objects here. So these are the items in the list. So it's basically an array with objects and another array with more objects and another array with more objects. And it's searching through so many layers of nested objects without very much code because this functionality is built into Vuetify. So they basically just add this filter function. Now, one thing that they have in Element UI that I wish they had in Vuetify is draggable. Even if you search for draggable here, there's no functionality for lists or this TreeView element to be draggable in the Vuetify framework right now. The recommended way to make things draggable in Vuetify is wrapping lists or wrapping the TreeView in this Vue draggable library, which actually has some really cool features for nested dragging and doing a lot of different things. And it works well with Vue lists. Now, I haven't gotten it to work yet with TreeView, but I'm hoping to use this component in an upcoming live stream for an app that I'm going to be building. So I'm still going to work at trying to make these tasks here draggable. Otherwise, I might have to build my own solution or maybe just pull in that one component from Element UI. But overall, this is a really nice component, hoverable, draggable, stylable, and flexible with lots of different events and those kind of things. The code isn't really interesting. It's just built off the documentation. All it is this one TreeView component, which is kind of amazing. I'm just passing it the items and then setting it as selectable, and that's what's on the page right now. There are also events I can use so I know which items have been checked or clicked on, and then use that information somewhere. Vuetify overall does a really great job with events throughout the library. So let's talk about their calendar. This might be Vuetify's best component that they have. You have all these different views. You have month, week. You have a standard day view. And then you have this 4-day view, which I've never seen before. And I'm not sure why you would want 4 days. But it's there, and you can modify it to a different number of days if you would like, say, a 5-day work week. There are absolutely tons of props and styling options and different things that you can select, as well as a whole bunch of events, so you can get all of the different information if a user is clicking on a day or somehow interacting with the calendar. I mean, look at all this information that you get. And I've tried out this calendar in several different ways, and it works amazingly well. It's sensitive to exactly where I click in the information, and I haven't found any bugs with it yet. So I'm going to be using this on an upcoming live stream as well, which is another reason why I'm testing out all these calendars. Definitely a lot more robust than the options you have in Element UI and actually any other UI component library that I've ever seen. Now, another component that Vuetify has related to the calendar and that you see a lot of calendar apps using now is this vTimeline component. And it's basically a vertical timeline where you put different things that line up in chronological order with some kind of time or date. You can see this with a very good example they have at the bottom here, where it basically styles this timeline and gives you kind of an example of how you could use this as maybe an alternative view in a calendar application. So let's look at the table. Now the table has come a long way since I first started using it and how I remember it initially. So this is just a default example that they give you out of the box. It basically gives you all sorts of things like sorting. It also gives you filtering and searching. It shows you examples where you can add a new item with all the fields here, edit, pagination, and it also gives you a lot of slots. So you can customize every single cell. You have access to the indices of all your data. Of course, you can customize the header, the footer, up here, every part of this. One relatively new feature that they've added in these data tables is the ability to have a fixed header. So you can just set the fixed header prop now. It's a Boolean. And if you have a lot of data or a table with infinite scroll, that's so important. I know you can do it with CSS, but it's just easier if you have a prop right there and you can use it out of the box. They have a crazy amount of components and examples for tables here, such as you can edit inline. It gives you this interface with the pop-up here to use content editable. The only thing I think they're really missing is that there's no functionality for having fixed columns. So you can fix the header, so when you scroll the header will stay visible, but you can't have horizontally fixed columns. So if you need to scroll over, let's say you have a bunch of columns, that would be a nice feature to add. And in fact, people have been asking for them to add this for several years now. This question is from July 2018, and there's still quite a bit of activity talking about this. There are examples that people have made with using CSS or with forking Vuetify just to add this one feature. So I definitely think that they will add this functionality soon. It seems to be something that I use a lot. And that's one area where Element is ahead with some of the table props, like having the ability to fix columns. Now, if you look at the code for the data table, it's expecting arrays of headers and of items. So you'll just have to process your data before you pass it into the table to get it in the format it wants. This template slot I'm using right here is for this header above the whole table, which I can optionally have. I have that vertical liner and then the button drawn all the way to the right. A lot of the code in this file is for that V dialog that pops up so you can create new items or edit them. Now I have another slot here. This is for the action items, the pencil icon, and the rubbish barrel. So I get all of the information about the item, the row and the column, so I can perform CRUD operations on them easily here. So let's look at forms in Vuetify. Of course, you get all of your standard form elements, different types of inputs and drop-downs, checkboxes, radio, all of those things. It also gives you basic ways to validate the form, and the styling for these error messages and colors and everything just comes out of the box as well. Then you get access to these methods to reset the form and reset validation and also to validate. So a lot of times you might not have to add a separate validation library. If you look at the form component here, the form is just wrapped in this vForm element, which renders to an HTML form element. And then I have these vText fields inside. Now the default validation is to use this rules array, which, like it shows here, is just a list of functions that try to validate the value inside of that input. And if it's not valid, it'll display whatever error is in this string here. And then you can use Vuetify's built-in validation method. So you can use validate, you can reset the form or reset validation. If you want a more comprehensive validation library and a lot more options, Vuetify also gives you examples of common Vue validation libraries in the documentation. So there's Vuelidate and there's vValidate. Now I think this example is outdated for vValidate, but I'm currently using Vuelidate in some of my applications and it works really well. It's really robust and it has built-in options for things like validating email and other common input fields. As I mentioned before, one of the reasons why I've been testing out these components is that I'm using them in a productivity application that I'm building, and that's also going to be an upcoming live stream series for my Vue.js and Django application on this channel. I'm just trying to finish up the curriculum app so I can start that one. I don't think any one video can cover all of these components in Vuetify. There's just so many. Some of the interesting ones, I think, are autocomplete, which automatically filters and highlights. Skeleton loaders, which is one of the newer components. You see this on YouTube and a lot of other sites now where it'll load these dummy cards and dummy components until your site can actually load all of the images and stuff. It's a really good experience for users. Another thing they've added is sparklines. So this is basically a simple chart, and I didn't even know they had this before, but you can basically pass in and display data built into Vuetify. Now, would I use this for charts? Probably not, unless I just needed something simple on a dashboard or a small page. But sparklines do allow you to make nice line charts straight in Vuetify without using something like Draft.js. Another thing to look at is if Vuetify is good on mobile. Of course, part of it is up to how you design the application, but Vuetify's grid and components are all mobile friendly. And they also have some features specifically designed for mobile, like this bottom navigation that you don't really use on a standard website, but if you're putting navigation on a mobile app, this would be great to put at the bottom. As you're navigating around the Vuetify application, you'll notice in some cases, such as this modal here, Vuetify automatically focuses elements, which is great. So I can navigate with a keyboard, but other times, such as when I open the draw menu, for some reason Vuetify is not automatically focusing that, and I have to tab over a whole bunch of times before I focus on the navigation in the draw. There doesn't seem to be any prop or functionality for Vuetify to do this for you, and it's kind of annoying when I have to tab over like 30 times just to get to the menu that I just opened. But overall, I can navigate pretty well with a keyboard. Also, now that the draw's open, I can't hit the escape key to close it, and I don't know why. I guess after using Vuetensils, I realized that that was nice to have, that they just built it into the draw menu. Now when I open the modal, I can hit escape and it closes, so that's nice. Now with all of these components, you probably don't want to import this massive library and so many features into your application. Well, the good thing is that Vuetify has Treeshaking built in out of the box. And if you have created your project with the Vue CLI plugin, in other words, you typed in Vue add Vuetify in the beginning, you have automatic tree shaking enabled. If you didn't do that, Vuetify walks you through how to do it later on, or you can also have the option to just import the components that you want into your library. Now, I have heard some people say that Vuetify is a little bit slow, or that the tree shaking doesn't work 100%, so maybe it's something that they're still working on. I think it's just a good idea in general to check your production build and make sure that everything that's in there is supposed to be in there and you don't have lots of extra code being bundled into whatever you're pushing up to prod. Now, whenever I'm pulling in new packages into my project, I try to take a quick look through the GitHub and understand what they're doing and look at the code quality and stuff like that. As with any open source library, you can come into GitHub and look at all of the source code for the components and directives and other things used in the Vuetify framework. Now, the one thing about Vuetify is that this is a well-written, optimized, kind of advanced code base. So it does take a bit of digging to understand what's going on here. So let me just pick a random component, VChip. So I have my styling and then I have the main part of the component. And you'll notice that it's just JavaScript because they aren't using templating here like you would if you were building a standard Vue project. They are actually doing custom rendering here. So you can see they're building the options object. Here's computed and data, the lifecycle hook created, and then you have methods. And then you have this render function where they're building the component. But I think it does take a while to get used to it and also start to traverse the code base and say, okay, now I have the colorable file, let me go to this file and see where it is, and so on down the rabbit hole. If you're going to look through the actual GitHub code, then you're probably going to want to pull it down locally so you can search and have multiple files open and stuff like that. Definitely a more advanced code base. So overall, I would say that Vuetify has very good documentation. The examples are extremely good, well maintained, lots of features. If you like material design, I think it's hands down the best option for that. I use Vuetify in a lot of my applications that I'm building because it's just easy and things work out of the box. And I don't have to worry about a lot of styling like spacing and creating even things like color themes until later on. If you want to know more about Vuetify, definitely go and check out my course on scrimba.com. It's a free, almost 2-hour long course where we go through a lot more components and also build an application. And if you want to stay in touch throughout the week, I'm active in the Faraday Academy Discord server, which you can join via the link below. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new. If you did, then please don't forget to like this video and let me know in the comments below what you liked about it, as well as if you have any recommendations or anything to add to the discussion about Vuetify or Vue UI frameworks. If you want to see more content like this, then please subscribe to my channel. If you would like to support my work, there are several ways listed in the description below, and it also does really help me if you interact with this video. So have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.